Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics. Dio here. Today we have a 2008 Mercedes R320 with a 3.0 liter. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the vehicle is losing power intermittently. The customer also stated that the check engine light comes on and off while the engine is running. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the customer's complaint, we're going to connect a scan tool to the vehicle to see what kind of trouble codes we have in the engine computer. Now, before we go inside the vehicle, I wanted to thank the owner of this vehicle for bringing business to us. The owner of this vehicle is one of my subscribers. He found me on YouTube, he emailed me, we emailed each other back and forth, and after that I gave him the shop's address. He brought his vehicle to our shop so that we can fix it. So I wanted to thank Sean for bringing business to us. So with that being said, let's go inside the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. So let's start the engine. So right there, as you can hear, the engine is running and the check engine light didn't stay on. Okay, so check engine light is not on. I know the customer told me that this issue is intermittent. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key back on. I'm gonna get a scan tool connected to the vehicle. After I get the scan tool connected, I'll bring you guys back up so we can scan the engine computer. Let's see if we have any pending codes in the engine computer's memory. So I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. So now let's see what we got. So right there, the scan tool has identified the vehicle, 2008 Mercedes R class with a 3.0 liter. So that's good. Let's click OK. Now let's do a code scan. Let's scan all the control units on the vehicle. The scan tool is done scanning all the control units on the vehicle. We have 3 trouble codes in the engine computer. The first trouble code is 2359 and it says check system charge pressure control, too low boost pressure. And then the second trouble code is 2359 and it says check system charge pressure control, charge pressure is too high. And the third one is 2510 and it says check component Y77/1 boost pressure regulator, positioner signals fault. So I am pretty familiar with these trouble codes. The first trouble code is usually set when you have a low boost problem. Okay, so a low boost problem can be caused by a defective turbo or a leak in the induction system between the turbocharger and the intake manifold, or you could also have an issue with the boost pressure sensor on the intake. The high boost trouble code on the other end is usually caused by a defective turbocharger or a defective boost pressure sensor, which is not really likely. The third thing that can cause this trouble code, the charge pressure is too high trouble code to be set, is a sticking actuator. Based on experience, when I see these 2 trouble codes set in the engine computer, the low boost code and the high boost code, when they both set at the same time, the issue ends up being the actuator on the turbocharger or the turbocharger itself. I'm gonna explain why. It's very rare to have low boost codes and high boost codes to be set at the same time. Now, since we have both codes set at the same time, and we also have a third trouble code that says check component Y77/1, this component Y77/1 is the actuator on the turbocharger itself, the electric motor that the computer uses to actuate the turbocharger. Now, since we have these 2 trouble codes set and we have the third trouble code that tells us to check this actuator on the turbo, I believe what's happening here is the turbocharger actuator is sticking. So sometimes it's sticking on the high position and sometimes it's sticking on the low position. That's why we have a low boost code set in memory and a high boost code set in memory. Because the way this works is when you're driving down the road and you want to go faster, you step on the accelerator pedal all the way to the floor, you will need high boost to create more power so that the vehicle can drive faster. So what the engine computer does is it actually opens the vanes inside the turbocharger all the way so that the turbo can spin fast enough. If it spins really fast, it's going to create more boost pressure. When we have more boost pressure inside the intake manifold and you open the injectors long enough to spray more fuel in the cylinders, it's going to create more power and the vehicle will drive faster. Now, it does that, the computer controls that by actuating the actuator on the turbo. Now, if that actuator is sticking, when it goes high, instead of coming back down fast enough, it sticks up, and that can create unnecessary boost pressures, which will cause high boost pressure trouble codes to be set. Now, what I want to do is I want to test drive this vehicle at this point. I want to test drive it to see how it drives, because right now, as you guys saw, the check engine light is not on. So this is pretty intermittent. And I'm pretty sure this actuator on the turbo is failing intermittently. It might be working fine right now. And whenever it decides to fail, that's when it causes these two trouble codes to be set. This is like a dead giveaway, this third trouble code over here. So our issue is most likely the actuator. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go on a test drive. We're going to graph our boost pressure data PIDs on the engine data. We're going to test drive the vehicle and see how it drives. And when we get back to the shop, we're going to check the wiring of the turbo actuator. If the wiring is good, we're going to actuate it with the scan tool to see how it goes up and down. If it sticks, we're going to replace the actuator and this will be fixed. Okay. The other thing that can cause these trouble codes to be set is sticking vanes. If the vanes inside the turbo are sticking, they can also cause these trouble codes to be set. Usually when I have turbos that have vanes that stick on the inside, this third trouble code is usually not set. Usually I just see these two trouble codes set in memory. The low boost trouble code and the high boost trouble code set at the same time. Okay, but that's something to keep in mind. We're also going to check the vanes inside the turbo. So before we go on a test drive, let's scroll down. This vehicle is pretty good. It doesn't have a lot of trouble codes. The other modules here don't have any trouble codes in them besides the tire pressure monitor control unit, and the code it has is 9200. The tire pressure of at least one wheel is implausible. Okay, so let's keep scrolling. Another one in the radio control unit, one more code in the radio control unit. And then on the OBD2 side of the tool, the generic side of the tool, we have one trouble code, P0234, and it says turbocharger / supercharger A overboost condition. Okay, so, and like I said earlier, these overboost conditions are usually caused by a defective actuator or a bad turbo. All right, so now let's go into the engine computer. So let's look at our data. So let's go to check boost pressure control. So we got boost pressure, boost air temperature, particulate filter differential pressure. Let's graph our boost pressure. So I'm going to start the engine. All right, so right now everything seems fine. The check engine light is off, the engine is running, and at idle we have a boost pressure of 946, so 946 HPA. Okay, so let's take this for a quick spin. So let's drive out of the shop. Alrighty, so let's take this vehicle for a spin and see how it drives. So I got my scan tool right there. I'm gonna be watching the data as we're driving. So let's see how this is gonna drive. The vehicle drives well. It shifts well. I'm looking at the data right now. Everything looks good on the scan tool. So my boost graph is increasing and decreasing nicely and smoothly. So this issue is definitely intermittent. So far so good. I'm not gonna drive this vehicle for too long. I'm gonna turn around and drive back to the shop. What I want to do is, let's get back to the shop. We're gonna use our bidirectional controls on the scan tool. We're gonna actuate the actuator on the scan tool and see how it does. Okay, and hopefully we can get it to act up while we're testing it. I'm gonna drive back to the shop. We're gonna test that actuator. Hopefully we can catch it in the act. But if we cannot catch it in the act, I don't know. We can either just go ahead and replace it, or we can give the vehicle back to the customer and tell him to keep driving it until that actuator goes bad completely. Then we can replace it, because right now I cannot duplicate the fault. You know, everything is good. Everything seems to be working fine. The vehicle drives well. Okay. So I'm gonna drive back to the shop. I'll bring you guys back up once I get to the shop. We are back at the shop. I got the vehicle on the lift. So now I'm gonna remove the engine cover. I'm also gonna remove this bar that goes across the engine. I'm gonna do this off camera. I don't have to show you this boring part of removing the engine cover and this bar that goes above the engine. I'm gonna remove all these components, and then I'm gonna bring you guys back up so we can do some tests at the turbo actuator. I got the engine cover removed, so now we're gonna test the turbo actuator. The turbo actuator is right over here. Okay, so this actuator here is what's causing the trouble code to be set. This is the actuator. Now there is a lever back here. This little lever over here is connected to the vanes in the turbo. Okay, and it's also connected to the actuator. Now we're gonna use our scan tool to turn this actuator on and off. So when I turn it on and off, this lever should go up and down. So it should go up, up and down like this. Up all the way and down all the way. Okay, and it has to go smoothly. If it doesn't move when we actuate it with the scan tool, that will tell me that the actuator is most likely bad, or the wiring. Okay, now we're gonna use our RTL scan tool. I switched scan tools. We're gonna use the RTL scan tool. I already scanned the vehicle, and on the RTL tool we have two trouble codes in the engine computer. Now I could not actuate the actuator with my snap-on scan tool. The snap-on scan tool didn't give me a long list of functional tests, so I believe the RTL should be able to actuate the actuator of the turbo. So let's go into the engine computer. So let's go to active test. So here it is, Y77/1 charge pressure positioner. This over here is the actuator. So let's click on it. So we're gonna bring our scan tool over here. So let's click OK. So we're gonna turn it on. I hear a click. You hear that? I don't know if you can hear the click, guys. I don't like the clicking sound that this actuator is making. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm basically pressing the buttons on the scan tool to actuate the actuator. Actually, let me back out. Let's redo this. Okay. Now I want you to watch this lever on the actuator. Okay. So let's test that again. So watch that. I'm gonna click on F1. Now let's click on F4. You see that? It went down. Let's click on F5. So we are definitely able to control this actuator. Okay, so the lever went down, up. Can you hear that? So this actuator is sticking, guys. It shouldn't be making this noise. Yeah, this is the problem. The fact that it's making that, you see, now it just went back. So the fact that it's making that clicking sound, that tells me that this actuator is bad. Let's do this one more time. I think I might have a used actuator here laying around here in the shop. I did replace a turbocharger in a Sprinter not too long ago. The turbocharger was leaking and I kept the old turbocharger. The actuator is still on it. Actually, what I can do is I can disconnect this actuator and bring the other one I have, the old one, and connect it. We're gonna do the same test. You will see that when you actuate that one, it doesn't make the clicking sound. So the clicking sound that you heard is the sound inside the actuator. So the gears in this actuator are probably binding. And I don't think we have a problem in the turbo. I don't think the vanes in the turbo are binding, because if they were, this lever over here wasn't gonna go up and down easily as it's going. Okay, so the problem is just the actuator. Let's do this once again before we try the other used actuator that I have over here. So I'm gonna click on F1. You hear the noise? Went down, came back up, down, up. I press F5, it doesn't make that noise, but when I press F3, it goes all the way up, and then there's a clicking sound. Okay, so let's back out of this test. So what's next, guys? Now, since our actuator is going up and down easily, our wiring is good, okay? We don't have a wiring issue, and we don't have to check the wiring, because if the wiring was bad, this actuator wasn't gonna move. Since we can actuate this actuator with the scan tool, that tells me that the wiring is good. So now what I wanna do is I wanna remove this inlet tube over here. So let's get the scan tool out of the way first. So now what I want to do is I'm going to remove this air inlet tube. I'm going to do that off camera. I'm going to remove it, and then I'm going to disconnect the electrical connector of this actuator. I have a used actuator somewhere here. We're going to connect the used actuator and do the same test to see if the actuator that I have will make the same clicking sound like this one is. If it doesn't make that clicking sound, that will once again confirm to us that this actuator is indeed bad. Okay, so I'm gonna get this tube out off camera, and then I'll bring you guys back up. I wanted to show you this turbo and the actuator before I remove it. So this is an old turbo, it's bad. This turbo had an oil leak problem. The actuator is still good. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this actuator. As you can see, there's a lever that connects this actuator to the lever over here on the turbo to open and close the vanes inside the turbo to create boost whenever the computer wants it to. Okay, now the clicking sound that we heard from the actuator that's on the vehicle, I want to remove this actuator and connect it to the electrical connector on the car. We're gonna actuate this one with a scan tool to see if this one is also gonna make the clicking sounds. I'm pretty sure it will not make that clicking sound. If this one doesn't make the clicking sound, it's gonna be another way for us to 100% confirm that that actuator is bad, okay? Because it's failing intermittently. We have to be 100% sure that the issue is just the actuator, not the whole turbo itself, okay? So I'm gonna remove this. We're gonna connect it to see if this one is gonna make that clicking sound also. If it doesn't make the clicking sound, we will be 100% sure that the actuator on the turbo on the vehicle is bad, okay? So I'm gonna get this out off camera and then I'll bring you guys back up. So I disconnected the actuator on the turbo. I got the electrical connector of this actuator connected to this one. We're doing this to see if this one is gonna make that clicking noise also. If it doesn't, then we will know for sure that this guy is bad. Now I see a little bit of oil over here on the turbo inlet. So this is not a lot of oil, but I'm gonna let the customer know, because if you see a lot of oil around here, that's an indication of a leaking turbo, okay? The seals in the turbo might be leaking, and that's not good, because if your turbo is leaking oil, that means it's gotta go. You gotta replace it, okay? Now, this area over here is not really wet. I've seen worse. It's not too bad, but it's something to keep in mind. So at some point, this turbo will have to be replaced, okay? But for now, it's not too bad. So let's actuate this actuator to see if it's also gonna make a clicking sound. I have my scan tool over here. So now let's turn this on and see what happens. I'm sorry for the buzzing noise in the background. So let's actuate this actuator over here and let's see what happens. So I'm gonna turn this on. So I'm gonna show you the actuator as I'm turning it on with the scan tool. Did you see that? Okay. Now I'm gonna press F3. Now I'm pressing F3, but there's no clicking sound coming from this actuator. Okay. So this actuator over here is going bad. So to watch that actuator over there, I'm gonna press F5 here. Watch that. F5, F4, now F3. You see, so F3 it goes all the way, but there is no clicking sound like we heard on the old actuator. Let's do this again. F4, F5, F3. Okay, so when we press F3, there's no clicking sound that we heard from this actuator. Okay, so that's good, guys. This actuator over here is bad. Okay, we gotta replace that. That's all it needs. We need an actuator. And remember, there was a code that said check component Y77/1. So again, we have confirmed that this is bad. I feel comfortable condemning this actuator. This actuator here is not clicking, but this one is clicking. So this is bad. It's failing intermittently. Okay, so let me disconnect this. Okay, so let me reconnect this one over here, and you'll see when this one is connected and we turn it on with the scan tool, it actually makes that clicking sound, which tells me that the gears in this actuator are bad. So I'm gonna reconnect this electrical connector so we can hear that clicking sound once again. So I got this actuator reconnected. So let's actuate it and see what happens. See that? You hear the noise? You hear the clicking sound? So every time I press, so when I press F4, nothing happens. Watch that, nothing. So I'm gonna press F5. Okay, nothing happens. So now let's press F3. Listen. So every time you press F3, it makes that clicking sound. So this actuator is bad, guys. We have to replace this actuator, okay? So I'm gonna back out of this test. All right, so I feel comfortable replacing this actuator. After I get this actuator replaced, I'm gonna erase the trouble codes and I'm gonna test drive the vehicle again. At that point, I'm sure the vehicle will be fixed. So this actuator over here is defective. It's making a clicking sound when we press the F3 button on the scan tool. But when we connect this actuator and we press the F3 button on the scan tool, this one is not making noise. So the gears in this actuator over here are most likely binding. So now I'm gonna get this actuator removed. We're gonna get a new actuator. Hopefully we can find a new one. If we cannot find a new one, we're gonna have to get a used one. I'm not gonna sell this to the customer. I like to keep this in the shop because doing this test we just did with this actuator has given me the confidence to 100% say that this over here is bad. So this actuator is good to have around. I'm gonna have to get another actuator that we're gonna install on the vehicle, and after we install another actuator on this vehicle will be fixed, okay? We test drove this, the vehicle was driving fine. This issue is intermittent, so I don't see the need of bringing you guys back up after I install the new actuator to take you guys on a test drive again. I'm gonna leave this right over here. This is pretty definitive. Once we replace the actuator and erase the trouble codes, this will be fixed. Alright guys, so I'm gonna leave this video right over here. The problem on this Mercedes is a defective actuator. Removing this actuator is really straightforward and really easy to do. So there's basically 3 bolts back here you have to undo. They are 10mm bolts. You're gonna undo these 10mm bolts and then disconnect the lever on the actuator. There's a little snap ring that you have to undo on this lever over here that connects the lever on the turbo with the lever on the actuator. Once you disconnect that, you're gonna connect the lever on the turbo to the lever over here on the new actuator and put the snap ring back, and you bolt these 3 bolts, and that's all, okay? And then you have to reconnect the electrical connector in the back and clear the trouble codes, and that should do it, okay? So I'm gonna leave it right over here. I hope you liked the video. This was a quick and easy one, so you know, I'm not gonna show you the how to remove and replace the actuator on this one, okay? So I'm gonna leave it right over here. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.